You're listening to Tipped Off, where leaders across the service industry share insights on operations, tech, and team success, powered by TipHaus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tipped Off. Very fortunate today to have us joined by Christin Marvin, with decades of experience in the hospitality industry, starting as a line cook and now as a fabulous restaurant consultant, author, among many other things. So, Christin, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So with this, I want to start by getting to know you a little bit, letting the audience get to know you. I alluded briefly, you've got a 20 plus year in the restaurant industry. I see that you started as a line cook at 15 years old, which we'll get into the legality of that, I'm sure, at some point later, but I love it. And of course, now, scaling brands to nearly 50 plus locations. What drew you to hospitality originally? What kept you passionate for so many years within this industry?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I got a job at one of my favorite restaurants that my family and I used to go to. And I think, I don't know what legalities look like in Missouri, but I think you could work 3 or 4 hours after school and be okay, right? I just had to be at home by a certain hour,
There you go.
Really got my taste again at 15. And I just loved being busy. I loved the work. I took a quick, brief moment to check out some retail and quickly found that was not the path for me. It was very boring. Loved folding the jean wall, making it look good, but that was about all I really wanted to do. So and then I jumped into the front of the house and really, I was a very shy kid from the Midwest, small town. And when I got a job serving and bartending in the big city of Colorado Springs, when I moved there at post high school, it brought out this extrovert in me that I didn't really know existed. And I was learning constantly every day. Every guest was different. Every interaction was different. The team was different every day. I made some really great friendships there and made great money. At 19 years old, it was an absolute party. And so I realized that the more and more I learned in the business and the more that I could apply myself, really the sky was the limit. And so I started, kind of working my way up through my career when I made it a career decision and said, okay, I'm going to learn how to do everything. I want to learn how to cook. I want to learn how to be an AGM. I want to be a GM. I want to be a regional. I want to work up into owner and, eventually became managing partner, not full blown owner, but just managing partner. And I think the constant, I love this industry so much because it's constantly evolving. There's constant innovation. I am still amazed that I can walk into a coffee shop and just be completely blown away by
100%.
By their take on it. We've got one down the street here. I live in Denver now, and there's one down the street where you walk in, the menu's in Spanish. They talk to you in Spanish. The pastries are in Spanish. It's just, I've never seen anything like it before, right? It's incredible. So I think the constant innovation, evolution just really keeps me coming back for more. And I'm just, thirsty for knowledge and new experiences.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I started, no secret, I started at Chili's when I was 16 and worked my way up there, managed a wine bar in college, did the whole thing. And agreed. It's fabulous money, particularly when you're younger, particularly as you've got other things going on in your life. It's unbelievable money, flexibility, things that go with it, teaches a whole slew of skill sets, right? Of how do you chat with people? How do you deal with problems? How do you deal with grumpy customers? No secret that I'm a believer that every human should work in the service industry at some point.
Totally.
I think the world would be a better place if we all had a little bit of that experience with it. But I love to hear that. And, looking at both of us now, obviously still very much in the hospitality industry, but from an entirely different lens, right?
Yeah.
A whole new perspective of it. So I love to hear it. Tell me, you've opened restaurants, you've worked GM, you've worked cooks, you've worked it all. Now, recently, of course, you've coached dozens of clients in the restaurant industry. From all of your experience, as you've looked at it from a multitude of perspectives, what's the scaling mistake you see operators? How do people scale correctly? It's a hot topic item as consolidations come and go in the restaurant industry. Everyone who owns a restaurant, not everyone, most people who own a restaurant dream of a second, third, fourth, fifth, 50th location. How do you see that? What is that's preventing people from scaling, and how do people unlock a few tricks to scale?
Yeah, I think, I specifically coach independent multi-unit operators because I've been in the independent space besides my quick little stint in Outback there, when I was 19. I've been in the independent space for 20 years and I love it. And I've had a lot of experience growing, scaling myself, completely different concepts. And the same concept from 6 to 48 locations in 7 years. So really have seen the gamut. And the number one thing that I see and that I work with clients, the number one thing that I see is that they are promoting leaders that are loyal to them and creating positions for them and throwing salaries at them to try to keep them, instead of taking time to strategize the roles that the business and the company actually need to be stable and scale successfully, and then going and finding those people or developing their people into those roles. Because it's, when you are promoting loyalty, it's really hard to replace that person, especially if they're wearing a ton of different hats. And it's very costly to operate business that way. And so when you've got the roles clearly defined, again, it's something that you can scale more successfully. You can learn each time that you have somebody in that role. This worked, this didn't work, and you can continue to sharpen your business as you grow.
I love that. I think it's something a lot of people miss, and it's easy to be favorable to those who are loyal or those who've been with you at the beginning, but that's not the definition of scaling, right? I mean, scaling is there's going to be new positions created. There's going to be new demands. There's going to be new skill sets required. And I love that approach and would you recommend, do you put it down pen to paper? Do you have conversations and brainstorms with your customers and clients about it? How do you manage to make sure that they get a scope of what those roles are going to be and how they?
Yeah, we spend about 4 hours and we really whiteboard. Let's look at what the current organizational chart looks like in your business. Let's talk about what is working really well and celebrate that, because that's not something we do a lot in the industry, celebrate those wins, right? And let's talk about where the current gaps are in the company and where the overlap may be, where two people are kind of managing the same thing, which doesn't work, doesn't feel good for the teams, right? It's confusing. And then we create a vision of, okay, where do we want to go? What does the business need? And then we figure out how to close those gaps. And the organizational chart is something, like you said, it's going to change and evolve and grow. So it should be revisited every single year just to make sure that things are working properly and the business can continue to adapt and evolve as it needs to.
I love it. I appreciate it. And I know the audience will as well with it. So let's chat, kind of the opposite of planning out your scaling abilities. And that is turnover. Hot button item, obviously something that the restaurant industry is no stranger to. However, the last several years, of course, have really been tough on it, right? A gig economy, of course, has played a little bit into it. Overall economic conditions have played into it. Automations, things of that nature. But run me through, from your perspective, what's the most effective strategies you work with from your restaurants, your customers' restaurants, of how to reduce turnover, how to build stronger leadership teams? How do you ensure that you're keeping your best talent around and not just rewarding loyalty, but success on that end?
Yeah, nothing is more important than taking care of our people, right? And like you said, turnover is such a hot button issue and will continue to be over, the life of the industry. I have a client in Tucson who has 3 locations. Well, now 4. We've helped expand over the last couple of years. So we've been working together for 2 years. Called me and said, hey, we have many pain points, so we need to strengthen the business before we scale. But the number one thing is turnover is over 100% right now. So we had to get a handle on that. Now, the majority of the staff were called.
Was this QSR or FSR, if you don't mind me asking?
It's like a Starbucks, but for tea. So you could call it QSR, okay. but it's independently owned. So the majority of their staff are all high school and college. And it's a very seasonal business. So I had spent 2 years during the pandemic working in the world of ice cream, helping a concept that wanted to grow from 6 to 20. So I was like, I got you. I know exactly how to do this. We had shops with 100% turnover, which is just industry standard in ice cream. And we had some that were at 87% turnover, which were our production shops, which was really tough.
Oof.
So what we did was, and every time somebody tells me we're really struggling with turnover, my first question is, do you have something in place that you're using to hire people? Do you know what specific characteristics and core values you're looking for when you're hiring people for your company? And 99% of people say no. And this is a tool that I've used at a couple of different companies that I've worked at. And so what I do is I help, if the company doesn't have core values, we create those. We design behaviors around those core values, so that we can teach people this is what it means to show up at our business and have integrity every single shift. And then we create interview guides with those characteristics so the managers can ask specific questions and make sure that those people are aligned with that. There's a scoring mechanism for that as well. And then we pull those core values through the performance review process and through coaching. And so they're living, they're breathing. And so in that work that we did with that concept in Tucson, we were able to take their turnover from 100% down to 50%.
Wow. That is a massive cut. And I love, it's not only having a plan, but it's being adaptive. It's something that's ongoing, the coaching piece that goes along with it. And it must be continual. You will forget how a hiring manager made you feel 6 months ago, right? And when you're in the thick of it, you won't forget if there's a weekly, monthly process of you're seeing improvements, you're working on it. Would you mind, and feel free to say no by all means, but would you mind sharing just a little bit of the scoring mechanism? I think that would be fascinating to understand, like how you're looking at this during the interview process. How should you weight these individual items?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say I just had this conversation with a manager yesterday who was having a really tough time getting ready for a coaching session with an employee who's just not performing. And we said, okay, let's grab those core values. Let's go back to our sheet. The problem that this person was having was they weren't curious. They weren't learning more about the menu. They weren't being curious about the guest and what their agenda was and how to make it a great experience. Now, had we looked at that during the interview process, I usually have them rate on a scale of 1 to 5 in each core value where that person's landing, right? So let's say integrity is a 3, curiosity is a 4. If you've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 30 people that you're interviewing, it's very easy to tally up those scores and then look and go, okay, who is the best fit for this position? So it takes the personality, the personal touch out of it, the emotional component out of it, and just makes it so much more, measurable for the teams to make the right decision. Yeah.
And then you also have something to look back on, right? If these employees turn over and you scored them high, you can coach yourself on it. I think it's something I go through with interview fatigue, as we've always been scaling as we grow, is after the 10th or 15th interview, I'm having trouble, even with notes, remembering what I actually thought about the individual,
100%.
right? If you put a score to it, it's real.
Yeah.
And it's tangible. Hey, this was a 17 out of 20. This was a 19 out of 20. This is obviously the candidate I resonated with the most. I thought had the values that we needed, the skill sets that were required.
Exactly.
But I do know that if you're interviewing 10, 15 people, it's really difficult and you end up leaning on that emotional side, right?
Yeah.
You say, I liked how they made me feel at the time,
Yeah.
but is that really the best choice?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. When you've got multiple managers interviewing the same candidate and they're having their own scoring sheets, it's just incredible to see where their opinions lie, right?
And a great point of conversation between them, right? If there's a massive discrepancy between those scores, that's a good point to have a conversation. Let's sit down and see what you saw that I didn't, or if the candidate showed up differently this day, maybe something was going on.
100%.
All of those are outstanding. Yeah. So switching gears just slightly on you, you're a board member at CHOW.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, very active in wellness, mental health, hospitality as a whole. Why is that issue so critical to you? Why is it so critical right now? How can operators, it's something you hear a lot of, and I'd love to hear your opinion of operators, I would love to support this more. I'd love to get involved. I'd love to support my team, but I just don't know how.
Totally.
So how can they support those teams in that area?
Yeah. So just to kind of give listeners here a little context. So CHOW offers mental health and substance abuse resources to anybody in the hospitality industry. I have struggled with drinking. I ended a marriage recently because of it. And I've seen a lot of people in the industry struggle. We are still losing people to drug overdoses and to alcoholism and to mental health issues, and suicide. And so I think, every time a celebrity passes away or something big happens, we get this quick, cry for help that this is still happening. CHOW is giving people the platform to be able to have open conversations about that. So we offer in-person and virtual events for anyone in the industry to come in and have a safe, confidential conversation of what they're struggling with that day. And these are all free resources. We also offer resources to restaurant management teams. We call them an Amuse mental health course to understand how to recognize signs of declining mental health and how to have the conversation. The restaurant industry is hard. The hours are long. It's never been tougher to run a restaurant than it has today. And I know that stress from the owner and the operator is being passed down to the staff. There's no way it can't, right? And so it's so important that we are teaching people how to have these conversations. I still have a lot of conversations with people that are more annoyed that the term mental health is coming up with their staff than they are willing to jump in and help out. There's an eye roll. Oh, another mental health day. How many of these am I supposed to give out? This is ridiculous. There's different levels of severity. We have to start embracing that this is something that all of us deal with and have to manage constantly. And so CHOW's an amazing resource. We as restaurant owners and operators, though, our number one job is to protect our people and to protect this industry and to protect the reputation. And we can't do that if we're not taking care of our people. And so CHOW is so important because it just helps managers understand what signs to recognize. We've all seen that employee, I'm sure, that's come in hungover or they've been crying before they came in. And, no longer are we in a position where we can say, leave your shit at the door and come in for service. That's old school mentality. That's what I was, brought up in. We have to be able to teach managers how to say, are you okay? And be comfortable with that. And then be ready to receive that response and say, maybe I don't know how to help you, but we at least have some resources here to help you.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. The service industry is brutal on every level. And if you've ever worked in it for more than, just a few weeks, you've seen lots of the things you mentioned, if not everything, plus extras, right? Yeah. It is a ruthless industry. Give me a shameless plug for the listeners right now that are interested. How do they get in touch with CHOW? How do they find resources? How do they help their staff? Yeah, chowco.org has all the resources that you could need. So again, any meetings, any resources. We're also a resource broker. So if you have a server or a line cook that breaks their leg and they can't work and they don't know how they're going to pay their bills, we can help with stuff like that. So the burden doesn't necessarily fall on you. So there's a ton of resources and wellness partners on that site. That's incredible. I love it. And thank you for the work in it. It's something that's always needed for the industry and we'll always need more and more of. So absolutely. As we look at the experience you have with it, it's something you've written 2 books, which kudos to you. Thank you. That's an incredible piece. I know it's not easy to sit down and put words to paper and edit and go through it. Yeah. So pretty awesome. Thank you. Those are, multi-unit mastery and the hospitality leader's roadmap. Give me, the ultimate spark notes. If you picked one key lesson from each one of your 2 books, what would it be? And what would you say to operators out there? The books are so very different. Hospitality Leaders Roadmap is my memoir. I had some shit I had to get off my chest. I also felt, I felt like I love my story. I love my experience. I really wanted to share it with people. But the key takeaway from that is when I started to burn out and I started to drink heavily and cover up my unhappiness with where I was in my career, it was because I stopped investing in developing myself. And I put that onus on the company that I was working for. And I looked at the leaders at the top of the organization, like they were the experts. They knew what to do. And they were going to be the ones developing us. That's not how it is. Leaders are humans too. And we all have areas of improvement in terms of development. So when I was happiest in my career, it was because I was reading, setting the table, and I was going to trainings, and I was looking for ways to invest in myself and increase my self-awareness through self-assessments and things like that. The minute I stopped, my satisfaction and my growth stopped. And then I switched over to this awful, negative, fixed mindset and became very bitter and lost sight of who I was and what my passion was in the industry. So that's the first one. That's a great answer. And I appreciate that. Keep developing yourself. Always. What about the second one? So multi-unit mastery is a framework for independent restaurants that they all need and should have in place before they scale. That book came from years of coaching restaurant owners and operators, realizing that there were very specific common threads that were missing and that I had experience with in the past. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we need. This is what the industry needs. We need to create this and magnify the message here. That, I would say, if you're going to take one thing away from that, even if you incorporate one out of the many pieces of the framework into your business will be better as a result. But make sure you're strengthening number 1 and number 2 and filling those cracks in your foundation of the business before you think about 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's a great way to look at it. There's an order of operations, right? There are foundational pieces that must be done. Yeah. I love that. Okay. When independent operators, where I'm talking now just single unit operators going from 1 to 2, what is that one piece of advice? We chatted earlier, of course, making sure you understand the roadmap for hiring the personnel. And that certainly comes into play at scale. But making that jump from your hands-on every day, you live, breathe, and die in your restaurant, you're there with your team. And now you're going to open a second location. Obviously, you can't clone yourself. You can't be in 2 locations at once. So what is that restaurant operator looking or hoping to make that jump from 1 to 2? What is the one piece of advice they need to know? before adding any more?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. And I see, I think when you're running a successful business, a lot of people start coming to you and going, "Oh, I saw this great location. You should be over in this neighborhood. You should open this concept," right? All the guests know exactly what you should be doing with your business, right? It's hilarious. But so many opportunities come your way. And so it's very easy to jump and go, "Oh yeah, we have one successful restaurant. We can do this." People are cheering us on. We've got this great following, this great brand. Real estate developers are saying, "Yeah, this location would be absolutely perfect for you." It's really hard to say no to those things. But what you have to do before you even decide to expand is to create a vision for yourself of what role you actually want to play in the restaurant, instead of just pushing that gas lever, because you have to understand first and foremost what's going to make you happy and keep you fulfilled and passionate, because you are the leader driving every single aspect of the organization. You have to understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. You may say, "You know what? I just want to be the person that's going to be in charge of all the real estate and manage the contractors." Okay, that's fine. But there's also the financial aspect of the business. There's also the marketing aspect of the business, right? And you need all those things, especially now, to be very successful. And if you can't afford to hire people, or you don't have people internally to take on those roles, you will not be successful, and you will hate your journey, and you'll be pulling your hair out, which is going to impact your mental and physical health. So you have to know where you're going before you just jump into the pool.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. The opportunities will become more and more endless as you experience success, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you first start off, no one answers the call. No one wants to do work with you. But as you experience that success, you've got to be laser focused. And I love that starts with yourself, right? Understand, what do you like? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And recognize you're going to need some help along the way. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's important too to have an exit strategy. I'm going through this with scaling my business right now and understanding, what is it going to look like in 20 years when I want to get out of this thing? Having that end goal in mind, so that you don't get to the point where you're burnt out and you're like, "I want out of this." And then you realize it's not going to happen for another 3 to 5 years.
That's a great call out with it. Let's jump straight from landmine to landmine to another hot button topic. And that, to me, labor cost, right? Something that restaurants always need to be paying attention to. But I certainly can go hand in hand, of course, with turnover, can go with minimum wage and the conversations around there, even the no tax on tips. All of these come into labor cost and how they impact things. This is something you have a lot of work done. You've done a lot of great successes in this space, in fact, with saving 6 figures plus for a lot of these groups. Same thing as always. I know there is an abundance of information, and I never want to synthesize your work down to 1 or 2 bullet points or anything of the nature. But as is the beast of podcast, we're going to ask you to do just that, right? So tell me, if you had 1-2 changes at most that operators should be looking at making right away to improve efficiency, obviously trying to maintain all the other pieces, guest experience, and et cetera. What do you think it is for most operators out there? Where's the low hanging fruit?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I talked earlier about the organizational chart and the leadership, and that's a really easy way to save 6 figures out of the gate. I would say from a low hanging fruit perspective, though, that's something that is very easy. Anybody can implement today. I'll tell you a story. So a couple Fridays ago, I went to a client's restaurant, and she said, labor's high, 2 to 3 percentage points above where I want it to be. And minimum wage is going to go up 50 cents in January. And so we've started to cut now as they're going into the busy holiday season, right? Which just sounds backwards. And I said, are you scheduling labor based on labor percent or hourly sales? And she said, "I don't know what you're talking about in terms of hourly sales." I said, great. Let's jump on Toast and 7 shifts and let's see what's going on. So we simply took her schedule and we looked at the hourly sales, and we just went hour by hour. And we ended up cutting out $1,000 in labor, just not by cutting any shifts. We just adjusted in times, 15 to 30 minutes to an hour. So she had 4 servers coming in at 8. She didn't need them until 9, 9:30, and 10 o'clock. She had 4 servers coming in at 2. She didn't need them until 3:30, 4 o'clock, and 4:30. So just putting your people where your guest traffic is. And this is a tip pool. A restaurant's been open for 45 years. They've been doing things the same. The team is very tight knit. They're great. They're on top of it, but there's always room for improvement, and looking at those schedules on a monthly basis, on a seasonal basis, and just continuing to monitor the shifts, make sure you're offering a really great guest experience, that you don't have people standing around. If you've got people standing around, that's a great indication that you need to go back and adjust those schedules, right? So those little bitty things. And again, you don't have to have the tough conversations of, hey guys, we got to cut an entire shift out. Everybody is noticing that, hey, we're going to just adjust things 15 to 30 minutes here and there so that you're not standing around and everyone is more productive. They're working better together. And that brings more energy into the restaurant when people are in motion, right? So, yeah.
Nobody wants to be standing still, right? I mean, those are the worst times as a server. This is coming from a southern state where tip credit's in effect, but that's $2.13 an hour. I don't need, I'd much rather be doing something else. When I'm at the restaurant, I want to have 4, 5, 6 tables that I'm working. I want to be engaged. I want my staff, things. When they're moving at pace, everything feels good.
100%.
When it's slow, it gets clunky, right? Yeah. I mean, it really does.
It's interesting. I'm in Denver and I just moved back and I've been gone for 3 years, but I work with a lot of clients here and it's a very competitive landscape here. Minimum wage is up to almost 19 an hour. It's, it's very expensive to do work here, but there's still this explosion of restaurants happening. And a couple Saturdays ago, I decided to go take myself on a dine around. 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, just in an area. And what I noticed was that restaurant dining rooms were about half full on a Saturday night at prime time. And when you have a dining room that's half full, it is so hard to bring energy in besides music in a little bit of ambiance, 100%. Right? So again, just have, whether you're pushing tables together to make the dining room feel smaller, you're adjusting your staffing, it's really, really tough right now. So.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great call out. Christin, we're going to move to one of my favorite parts because, mostly I don't have to think about anything. I ask these questions to every guest.
Take a break.
And
sit back,
exactly
Kirk.
that. And I love, getting a good comparison and contrasting. Right?
Love it.
I mean, we get to see from so many operators, from single units to massive, massive enterprise groups. And I love having an outside perspective of touching a ton of industries and touching a ton of concepts right now. So from this question, my first one is always going to be, what is your favorite restaurant concept or brand? What does it do and why does it stand out to you? And I'm going to frame this. Usually I just say to the restaurant operator, it can't be your own restaurant. You touch a ton of restaurants.
Yeah.
So, you've got a much larger do not touch list, let's say, than others do. But tell me someone that you're not personally involved with and what do they do that makes them stand out to you?
There is a concept. There's a restaurant group that has popped up 4 locations in the last 18 to 24 months in Denver and Boulder. It's called, I don't know the name of their group per se, but one of the restaurants that I love that's in the group is Alma Fondafina. And they've just exploded on the scene. Food from Mexico City. They've got great press, Beard Awards, Michelin. I mean, they just came out with a bang. I've been to a couple of their restaurants. There's intention in every single thing, from the design of the chairs to the flow of how the servers work the room to the story that's being told in every single menu item that's from generations of family. It's just beautiful. I was there a couple weeks ago and I saw something. I almost started crying because I haven't seen it in a long time. A bartender from across the room saw a guest drop a piece of food, tartare or something, on the floor, came out from behind the bar with a cocktail napkin, picked it up off the floor, and then just went back to the bar. I just don't see that stuff happening anymore.
No, you don't.
And it just blew my mind. So they're doing really, really great work. And it's consistent amongst the concepts.
I love that. The intention behind it, right? I mean, you can tell when the owners are involved, the managing partners are involved, the general managers are there. Like, everything has a purpose and a reason. Yeah. It is not just for cost savings. It's not these items. It's to enhance the guest experience and to make sure that, it's something memorable, which is hospitality at its core, right?
Absolutely.
Truly. So I love it. That's a good answer, Christin. I thank you very much.
Sure. Come check it out when you're out here.
I will. I'll be in Denver before too long, and I'll definitely come check it out. Nice. Next on the item, 2-part question. It's going to be, what is the greatest challenge restaurants are facing today? And so is there an opportunity that arises for that? And I'll frame this with the second part of the question that's coming next, which is, what's going to be the biggest challenge restaurants are facing 3 or more years from now? So for the first one, I want to focus just on today. If you looked right now, what's the most critical, pressing item today? How should operators be thinking about it, responding to it, et cetera?
Yeah, I think retention is one of the hardest things that restaurant owners and operators are facing, and it's putting so much pressure on training and leadership development. We've got more new people in the industry than ever before, right? 6 million people left during the pandemic. Those positions have been filled, but they're filled with people with less experience. And so the productivity is down. The learning curve is slower. People don't, there's people coming into the industry. They don't know if it's a career yet or not for them. And they don't a lot of times understand the impact that they can make in the dining room and what hospitality is and why it's so important. And so for them, it's, a lot of restaurants are just a dime a dozen. So operators have got to be great at hiring, at telling their story, at training, and because it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to start to build that skill set and that level of expertise that we had pre-pandemic.
I agree. I think that's a fabulous piece to be paying attention to right now. And if we zoom out and you put on, your forward-looking glasses, let's say, what's going to be facing operators in 3 years? What should they be concerned about? And maybe not taking direct action right now, but let's at least call it planning or foresight for.
If restaurant owners in 3 years are not using AI in their business, they're way behind. AI can touch every single aspect of what they're doing. I'm a huge fan of it. I work with clients on introducing AI as a strategic business partner for them. They can use it for everything, for coaching, for hiring, for training, for payroll, for tips, right? Anything. Yep. I think restaurant operators are kind of, some of them are notorious for being late adopters. And this is coming at us so fast in every single aspect of our life, not just the industry. And so it's a very amazing thing that's challenging operators to think differently and be more productive. And it can just be such a beautiful tool if it's used in the right way.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more that the enhancement of hospitality, right? I mean, that's kind of the key piece with AI. Yeah. Is there are ways that it can enhance hospitality a ton, not necessarily replace, and it's not meant to, it should not be replacing the hospitable touch, right? That personal touch that makes diners feel great at a restaurant. So I love it. And last question for you, I promise. Another two-parter though, so maybe a little bit of a lie there, but it's telling me a little bit about two industry trends here, Christin. Things that you're seeing going on right now. One of these is a trend that you believe in, and you want your clients to embrace it. You want them to at least explore it and see if it's right for them. Mm-hmm. And then one you don't buy into, you say, I don't think that's a trend. I think that's a fad, and I think it'll fade before we ever have the ability to adopt that into our system. What do you see out there?
Well, it's interesting because I think years ago people started to really embrace technology and put the handhelds in place, and some people are realizing that is just not, technology does not necessarily have a place in the front of the house because it is impacting the guest experience. Like I said, I love the trend. Well, I don't think AI is a trend. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I do love AI from the perspective of helping the operator be more successful in the back of the house. I think that people are going to continue to seek out personal experiences in hospitality. I think with what we see happening with more tech coming in and more AI coming in and robots happening, I think that there's going to be this split of segment of diners that are coming in expecting a better guest experience from full service restaurants than they ever have before. And I love that. I think people are going to be craving those connections more than they ever have before. So I think some of that old schoolness is going to come back in, which is great. I'm not a fan of the robot stuff. Like I haven't seen it yet in person, but I don't go to QSR restaurants. I don't want to order something on a kiosk. We're on our devices so much, on our laptops, on our phones every day. When I take a break and set that stuff down, I just want to have a conversation with someone. And I feel like it's part of my duty being in the restaurant business for so long to help engage people that are in food service and make sure they're having a great day and tell them thank you and make eye contact. So I think robots in the front of the house are awful. I don't think there's any place for them. And I think it's an awful sign that businesses are just trying to save labor. And I just don't, I don't think it's a good, I don't think it's good for society. So.
Yep. I'm a big fan. I mean, if I just wanted a cocktail and an appetizer, I can do that at home for, $10 probably total. I go to chat with the bartender, get a recommendation, understand the area to see if something's going on around it. Right. And I love being a positive spirit back, being polite to them, chatting with them, obviously biased on my side, but leaving a big tip, as that is what our nature is. Of course, right?
Totally.
But that's awesome. Christin, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. For anyone that's listening to this, if you're interested in working together, I would love to gift you a coaching session, and let's start to strategize and figure out exactly where your business is at and what you want for the future. And let's go get after it. Contact me at kristinmarvin.com/contact. We can schedule time. My first name is spelled a little weird. It's Christin, and would love to have a conversation.
I love it. Well, Christin, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you having you on the podcast.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for listening to Tipped Off, the podcast for the service industry. For more tools and insights, visit TipHaus.com.